Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the first inaugural calf week as part of the GB dairy calf strategy. I welcome you all, and it's great to see a good attendance on this first one and the launch of the week. We were expecting to launch at Dairy Tech, but as you know, we have unfortunately had that postponed until April the 7th. Date for your diary there, and we will then move forward with other activities there. But for this week, we have held the week as it was planned, and we have this as the launch event. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a bit of housekeeping before we go into any more of the detail. So for those who are unfamiliar with GoToWebinar, it's quite simple. You are all muted, and the opportunity to ask questions is very much there. And I would encourage you throughout to be asking questions so that we can pose some questions to the people we have as speakers. And those questions are only able to be seen by yourself and ourselves. So there's no silly questions, there's no questions that we don't want asked, and we would encourage you to post those in the so in your drop down that will have a questions box, and you can type them in there. We are recording the webinar so that we can put it out onto YouTube, so be aware of that, although again this gives you a chance to watch back other areas from that. So that orange arrow will open up the box if you haven't already done so. Right, thank you, Maya. Thank you. So I'm Nick Parsons, Head of Dairy Development and KE for AHDB. I am hosting this primarily because I have led, along with the NFU, Phoebe Russell, the working groups that we've had working around the GB dairy calf strategy. And so I have faced up the front of this today and have the pleasure of launching this first week. So we will have a week of activity, which I shall go into in a moment or two. If I can have the next slide, please, we will talk through the agenda. So I'll give a bit of an introduction to the calf strategy itself, and which is created the GB Calf Week. Then Gabby Emery is going to take over on the operations of the Buitelaar Group at Long Lane, which is their farm down in the southwest. Jamie Robertson is going to come in talking about building design, and then Adam Buitelaar is going to pick up on those key factors in innovation and health that they've been using the farm to stretch and test out different ideas and processes. And then we'll come back all together and we'll go through the questions as we do at the end. But what I would encourage you to do is post questions at the start, so that as you hear and think of a question, put it into the chat box, and I can try and pose those as we go through, which will make it a little more interactive as a session. Thank you, Maya. So this inaugural Calf Week gives us a way of trying to communicate to farmers and stakeholders within dairy and beef about the calf strategy itself, and also with regards to trying to help farmers and the industry to move forward with the activities and priorities of that of the calf strategy. So the calf strategy has been in place since 2020. And although we've gone through COVID and so forth, a number of activities and meetings have been held with regards to trying to bring together the industry to support the direction of reducing and eliminating euthanasia of calves from the GB dairy industry. So the activity of the week was very much focused around the positive way of trying to help farmers to understand around good health and welfare, and the sustainability of dairy and beef, bringing those two industries together and making them work closer together. So it's been 18 months of working groups and working with stakeholders within those groups. There's 60 representatives, organisations within the wider strategy, and within that we've used a smaller working group to be able to develop ideas like the Calf Week and the Farmer Forum that we held a few weeks ago. And when we send out the email following this meeting, this webinar, there will be a link that gives you the chance to listen again to that Farmer Forum. If you could move one slide forward, please, Maya. So that focus on good health and management is what we want to talk about this week. We kick off today with this webinar, and it goes through to next Wednesday, the 9th of February, when we will be looking to tail the end of the work that we've done this week, and the meetings and physical meetings, the webinars, the videos that we're sharing, the social media that we'll be driving, and also those live farm meetings that we've got as part of the activity across the country. So there is a running order and the links that you need to sign up to the activities on the NFU and the AHDB website, and that detail will also be in the email that we share later. And you can find out more about the calf strategy and the priorities on that link there, which will also be part of the email that comes out later. But I just wanted to run through very briefly the priorities that we've been working on. So rearing all calves with care, I hope you've heard that described in the past, and that's looking to work across the whole supply chain of calves and trying to ensure that there's good calf health and welfare at the primary point of everybody's thoughts with regards to dairy and beef. Encouraging responsible breeding strategies, that's both through farm assurance, but also the work that we're doing to share and focus on ensuring that those calves are bred with the ability to rear those through the beef industry as a focus. Better communication of market requirements, and I think part of today and other webinars that we'll be sharing very much fall into that mark. And then supply chain, increasing the number of biosecure routes for TB calves and affected herds, high risk herds and so forth, and we'll be touching on that in other webinars, but also we did within the Farmer Forum. We've also been having meetings with governments to try and move forward with regards to trying to help farmers smooth out that process. And then beyond that, opening up new pathways for supply chain. So the outcome of that, those calves going into the beef supply chain, and the quality improvements that we've seen through new breeding strategies and so forth. And so developing those, as well as looking for new innovation and opportunities with regards to research and development, and trying to move forward the industry and support the industry with that. So they're the 7 priorities, and that's what's been the focus. I invite questions as we go forward. And next slide, please, if I may. So that's a bit of the activity. I'm not suggesting that you'll be able to see all the detail, but if you follow that email or go to the AHDB or NFU site, you'll be able to see the itinerary for the week. We've got a mixture of webinars. We've got a video being launched later this evening with regards to Red Tractor. We've got Sainsbury's and Blade supporting with regards to an open day at Market Drayton, which you can sign up to. We've got webinars. Volac are hosting a webinar about sustainability and efficient calf rearing. That's tomorrow lunchtime, similar time. And then we've got monitor farms, both open, beef monitor farm open in Herefordshire, and a webinar on Friday, which will be picking out on the health management of calves. And then over the weekend, there's social media activity, to then be followed by a webinar on Monday the 7th with Genus, and followed by a webinar by LIC around breeding and adding value for the straws going forward. So that's the way the week shapes up. We're also then launching a farmer directory, which hopefully gives farmers the ability to look for alternative options with regards to whether marketing or looking through markets or through integrated supply chains, to ensure that you can maximise your opportunities in adding value to those calves that you sell from a dairy herd. Right, without further ado, if we click to the next slide, I just want to touch on the Colostrum as Gold campaign that runs through February. This has been an ongoing campaign of trying to focus on ensuring the calf's health at that very early start point. And so there's more details can be found on the website through AHDB's website. But again, that and the campaign around Shout About the Sire and adding sire details to the passport are two campaigns that we've run over a number of years now, and would encourage you to get involved in both social media, but also focusing on yourself and with your teams and staff. Thank you very much. Next slide. So I'll introduce Gabby. Gabby's going to take you through the first part of the session. And if I can once again invite you to ask any questions as you hear the presentation, then I would encourage you, and I'll try and pitch those in as we go. Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks, Nick. That's great. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Developing Calf Rearing for the Future webinar. Really pleased to get to speak to you all today, and hopefully you'll get a bit of an insight into what we're doing as a supply chain to ensure a productive and efficient calf is produced for the further producer. So I think probably the best thing to do is to jump straight into our pre-recorded farm tour. So as I say, not the same as in person. We'll be very much pleased to welcome you all down to the farm when restrictions allow, when we're able to get together. But yeah, without further ado, Maya, run the film, please. Hello and welcome to the Buitelaar Group's Long Lane Development Farm virtual tour. My name's Gabby Emery. I'm the Livestock Business Development Manager for the group. Although today won't be the same as it would have been if we were in person, hopefully it will give you a good overview and understanding of the farm operation. So follow me. Everyone is required to sign in upon entry to the farm. We provide PPE for all visitors in the form of an overjacket and boots, not only for biosecurity purposes, but we are also an AFU here at Long Lane, so to ensure that we are preventing any disease transfer between units, we require this to be worn at all times on site. So here we are on site. At Long Lane, we're a calf rearing unit with capacity for up to 1,200 calves at any one time, which will soon increase to 1,500 in the spring of this year. The farm was bought in August of 2019, and when we first bought the farm, there were some pre-existing buildings here. It was once used as a dairy some 40 plus years ago, but the sheds had actually already been adapted to be used as calf rearing units. So behind me you can see one of the pre-existing buildings. There are 4 of which we will take you around and we'll show you the development from there on out. This is the milk mixing room, where it all starts really, I suppose. We're feeding milk twice a day, mixing milk in the barrel here to my left, which is then pumped into our milk feeding trolley, which is holding up to 1,000 litres of milk at any one time. The best thing about our feeding trolley is that it retains the temperature of the milk. So it is fed at the optimum temperature from the first calf right down to the last calf. If there's 45 minutes of time passed between those 2 calves being fed, it ensures that consistency is delivered every time. So here we have the youngest calves on the farm. They've been here just about 2 weeks now. So during the milk period, they are fed twice a day directly into troughs, and they are fed ad lib cake during the milk period. So these calves are actually housed in our first generation of high health unit. As we go around the farm later, you'll see the further developments to the design. However, at the time we were utilising stock boarding for the sheds, which is still perfectly suitable for our unit here now. So here we are, two pre-existing buildings on site. The shed to my left is actually one of the best performing sheds on the site when we first bought the farm, which is where the inspiration for the high health units that we now have came from originally. These calves have been here on site for approximately 11 weeks now, so they're actually moved over into wean space. We operate a two-stage system, so when calves first come in, they're into milk sheds for the 6-week period. Following weaning, they move into wean space, which are these calves here behind me. So these calves are nearly ready to leave us. They're heading well into their exit spec, and as you can see, very well fleshed and ready to head on to the next producer in the supply chain. So we're here now at our mobile high health units. Calves obviously due to arrive imminently. This is where our feed trials on farm take place. So as you can see behind me, there is the two parallel auger systems running side by side. Panel tin and insulated roofing sheets are the key feature of these sheds, which are really, really important in ensuring that we are creating the correct climate for the milk calf. As you can see, these sheds are nice and shallow, which enables our staff to check calves easily. It's the most important thing in stockmanship, is the ease of being able to manage animals and ensuring that they're all at the front of the pens and very close to the stockman or woman is a really great feature. So as mentioned previously, this is where the feed trials take place. We've got two auger systems feeding from these bins, which are on weigh cells, that are feeding into alternate pens. So we're actually able to trial different feeds and ensure that the environment isn't a confounding factor in those trial processes. So here we have two further wean sheds on site. These two sheds were the first two to be built when we purchased the farm. They were designed in conjunction with Robertson, so really brilliant sheds. Calves are moved into here following the milk period, and they're actually on, as you can see, a 16% protein blend. They're transitioned over from a 17% pellet, which is also fed ad lib through the rearing period. So they come into here and are then grouped into bigger social groups than we have in the milk sheds. So as you'll see shortly, we have calves in pens of maximum 12, but ideally groups of 10 while they're on milk. And then when they're weaned, we move them into larger groups, as I say, sort of up to what we see here. We've installed enrichment throughout the farm for a lot of the sheds. It's been a really exciting project here actually to see quite how the calves engage and interact with the enrichment in their pens. Something else that we've got going on in this shed is actually an infrared lamp. So we've installed that for the purpose of trialling alternative beddings. As many will appreciate, straw is becoming extremely costly, and we're trying to understand as to whether we can utilise any of those alternatives to bring costs down but also increase health in the calves. So we're here now in our permanent high health unit milk sheds. These calves here have been on farm now for 6 weeks and they're currently in wean down. They'll be off milk come the end of this week. As you can see, we are utilising panel tin in these sheds. So we are lessening the use of concrete panels to avoid the energy loss in calves trying to keep themselves warm. There are sensors behind me. We're gathering the temperature and the humidity data from these sheds as well, which is really comparatively interesting from our sort of conventional housing to understand, how our own design sheds are really operating. In this shed, we're housing 160 calves at any one time, and we're actually currently in an expansion phase of the site. We'll have another approximately 300 calf spaces by the end of the springtime. The purpose of an AFU is to house TB restricted calves, and the reason why we're expanding this site is in order to support our supplying dairy farmers, whether they are restricted with TB or clear. So really that wraps us up for today. I hope you've enjoyed this virtual farm walk experience, and hopefully it's given you a bit of an insight into what we're doing here at Long Lane. We really look forward to welcoming you here in person in the future. Bye. Okay, great. Well, hopefully that gave you a bit of an overview as to what we are doing down at the development farm in Somerset. As I say, never the same as in person, but yeah, hopefully a bit of an idea as to what's going on there now. So yeah, just following on from there, I'm going to do a bit of a talk on processes and procedures on farm, just the general day-to-day management of calves on unit, and then I'm going to pass on to Jamie Robertson, followed up by Adam. So yeah, really just to give you a bit of an idea as to how we operate down at Long Lane. So as mentioned, we're an AFU, housing about 1,200 calves on farm, and the general sort of in and out, if you like, is 200 calves coming into us every fortnight from a TB collection, and then there's approximately 100 calves moving out every week. So that's kind of the throughput. Those calves are coming into us at sort of about a month of age, and they're landing there on a Thursday evening, and Friday morning it all kicks off really. So Friday morning the calves are vaccinated with their first pneumonia vaccine in the unit. So they receive a Buitelaar Respiratory, which covers them for a number of strains of pneumonia. That's an injectable, and they also receive a fly paw, so yeah, a paw on to just ensure that we are preventing any flies, lice, but also prevention of ringworm comes into that as well, stopping them scratching, stops the onset of yeah, any ringworm there. So really, I suppose after that, we're actually leaving them for sort of 2 weeks to just settle, to really just get used to their environment, their new friends in their social groups, and their new nutrition, I suppose, because at the end of the day, you know, those 200 calves we bring in could be from anywhere up to sort of 25 to 30 different farms. So realistically, we're actually managing an expected problem, and it's about ensuring that we have the correct protocols in place to ensure that actually those problems are managed appropriately, and they're not, you know, those disease pressures don't become too great that they, you know, cause an onset of pneumonia on unit. So yeah, following that, as I say, the next thing really is week 2. So any beef calves on unit will be dehorned at this stage. So they will receive a local anaesthetic along with a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, but we actually follow that up with an aspirin powder that we feed in the milk. So that's something that we feed the day before, the day of, and the day after any sort of management sort of stressful procedures in the calf's time on unit. It's an incredibly efficient way and cost effective way of ensuring that, you know, those stress procedures aren't so great that, as I say, we sort of cause a disease onset. So yes, they're dehorned at week 2. And then into week 3, they'll receive their second pneumonia vaccine. So that's another injectable of the Buitelaar Respiratory, and what that does is gives them a 6-month cover from then. So obviously covers them for the rearing period, which is obviously the most high risk, but also it offers a level of cover to our finishing farms. So these calves will be moving off farm after 12 to 14 weeks. So there is a level of cover over that risk period when they're transported to the next farm. So then 5 weeks in, we are castrating any male beef calves. There again, same process applies. So non-steroidal, local anaesthetic, and also an aspirin powder day of, day before and day after the procedure is done, just to ensure we're managing those correctly. And then we roll into week 6, which is weaning territory. So 42-day milk plan on farm, 6 weeks of milk while they're with us. And really around this time, what we want to do is just before we wean them, we weigh them to ensure that we've got an overview of how those calves have been performing whilst on unit with us. Yes, absolutely, we can make a visual assessment, and we have some really great stockmen and women down on farm, but actually it's really important for us to get the data behind that. You know, we work on evidence-based facts in the supply chain. We want to ensure that we have the data to support everything that we do. So it's about analysing that growth curve at that stage to understand, you know, if there are any calves that came in possibly slightly heavier and haven't grown as we expected them to. In that case, we can keep them on milk, you know, a week or so longer. So at that stage, when we weigh them, we actually clip their backs out. I don't know if you could see in any of those video clips, but actually there's sort of about a foot's width off the back of the calves, and that's literally just to ensure that they aren't building up a sweat. As calves perform, many people know that they start to sweat. A calf that's doing is sweating, and ensuring that that sweat buildup isn't causing an onset there again of any pneumonia, unwanted pressures. So taking the tops of their backs out, and we're also fly pouring them there again. As I say, mainly that is actually largely to do with sort of managing ringworm than it is flies. Of course, and some of that applies, but all year round it means that we like to you know, be able to keep on top of that ringworm problem. Anybody who's reared calves will understand that that's yeah, one of the things that will always crop up, and yeah, keeping it at bay is really important. So then at that stage they are weaned. They're actually transitioned at this period from a what would have been previously, as I mentioned in the video, a 17% protein pellet. They're then transitioned over onto a 16% ration, which yeah works incredibly well. That's ad lib through the period while they're with us. So then we're rolling into week 7, and they are TB tested. So everything on unit will receive a TB test, a pre-movement test, and then they really have a quiet couple of weeks with us until we get to week 10 on unit, and they're weighed again. So this is really their exit weigh. So we want to ensure that at this stage we are analysing their performance and understanding that they are performing to specification to be able to leave us and go to the next producer.
Gabby,
so
can I just jump in? Sorry, just to break in, and I think it just helped to understand. And you mentioned TB, and I think there's just an opportunity there just to widen the thoughts with regards to what you do with regards to your own business, and obviously you're down in an area where TB can be a problem. How can Buitelaar's is one of the questions. How can Buitelaar's help support with regards to TB? Is there a view with regards to how it can fit and what you might be able to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. So yes, I mean, I am Somerset born and bred, so chaptered and versed in the world of TB. It's really the main reason why we actually converted the site down at Long Lane at the development farm to an AFU, because essentially in our supply chain we are facilitating clean calves, but also TB calves. And at the time it was very clear that, you know, we weren't able to handle the number of TB calves coming through from those restricted suppliers that, you know, were in the supply chain. And look, I think it's fair to say that, you know, you could have all the TB space in the world, and sometimes, you know, there comes a point where you still possibly wouldn't be able to facilitate everything. But it was very clear to us that, you know, our real mission was to ensure that we had as much AFU TB restricted space available to be able to bring those calves in as, you know, young milk calves off farm for those who aren't able to provide the housing and the facilities on site. But actually for anybody who, you know, may want to keep those calves for whatever reason, albeit commercial, or they have the space. We've actually got contracts available to dairy farmers to supply those calves back to us, whether it be reared or even as finished cattle with underwritten prices, so that we're able to ensure that those calves are coming back. The dairy farmer has a sustainable fixed outlet, and in that name we actually have contracts available with, I know Jamie's going to go into the shed element later on, but with our high health units, we have a number of producers who actually we've placed sheds on farm with them, and the calves coming back repay that shed cost, which hopefully will help in the instance of a TB breakdown. So yeah, there's hopefully a couple of options available there. So yeah, no, as I was just saying that, sorry Nick, is that covered it? He's gone. Hopefully that's answered his question. So yes, I was just saying, week 10, we want to ensure that these calves are performing to specification to move on to the next producer. It's incredibly important for us that we're setting up a calf during the time on the unit for the rest of its life in the supply chain. So calves on unit are averaging 1.3 kilos a day while they're with us, but there is a minimum specification there that if they haven't met, then they won't go on in the further supply chain. They will be sold out externally rather than to our onward producers. So at that 10-week mark, they're also vaccinated with an IBR live marker vaccine. So there again, that's an injectable which gives the finisher another 6 months of cover from that point. So yeah, it's about ensuring that we've got that cover in place before the animals move, really, before they're going through, as I say, that high stress period. So yes, that's really the sort of basis of what we're doing while the calves are with us. As I say, they'll leave approximately 150 kilos, sort of 4 to 5 months of age, but it really is all about just setting up an efficient and productive calf during their time with us, that will hopefully go on and reap the rewards for the next farmer, and provide a margin for everybody in the supply chain. So as I say, a bit of a whistle stop tour, and Nick, I think unless you have any further questions on that bit, I hand over.
Yeah, so there was just a question from with regards to milk feeding protocols, but I think you've gone pretty thoroughly through. If there's anything else you wanted to just touch on with regards to that kind of early part, then by all means kind of pick up on that.
Yes, okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, I suppose there's a 42-day milk plan in place as standard. As I said, that may be tailored around calves coming in. If they're much over or above the average intake weight, then that can be adjusted. But the most important thing for us really is that during their time in that sort of 42 days, they're receiving some 29.4 kilos of powder, that we're actually providing them with the best possible powder available. We have reared some, well, it'd be hundreds of thousands of calves, I suppose, in our supply chain, but we've developed our own powders, and that's off the back of feeding our own calves. And it's been something that all we've wanted to do, as I say, is produce a productive animal that's going to not only provide that margin, but go on and perform incredibly well through the rest of the supply chain. And off the back of that, actually, that's really where our retail powders have come from, that I suppose some people may have come across. But yeah, it was really just been a case of something for ourselves to ensure that we've got the correct performance coming back through.
So we've just had a slightly more targeted question with regards to the milk powder and so forth. What levels, Gabby, are fed to the calves, and at what concentration of milk replacer?
Okay, so in terms of the concentration and the literage, we're feeding 3 litres either end of the day, so twice a day milk feeding, and that's at a concentration of 150 grams per litre. So that's 150 grams to make a litre of milk. So as I say, over those 42 days, we'll then actually get around about that 29.5 kilos of powder through the period. So as I say, those calves are coming into us at about a month of age. So of course, dairy producers will be getting more powder into their calves, but yeah, that's the general setup of the milk plan.
Brilliant. Right, thank you for that. I'll let you introduce Jamie, and we'll hold on to the other questions I've got here until later. Thank you.
No problem. Great. Okay. Well, hopefully that is enough of me, and you're well ready to hear from Jamie at this stage. So yeah, Jamie Robertson, our calf housing specialist. For those of you who haven't come across him, I'm sure that'll probably be a minor number. Hopefully Jamie will join me shortly, and I will let him take it away from there.
Gabby, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, here we go. Thank you all for coming along and joining in here. My bit is, some of you heard before. I think the main issue to come out of here is to suggest that purpose-built calf housing has a very productive role to play in the future of the dairy sector. I think that what Buitelaar do, and others the same, to soak up these calves coming out of the dairy sector that are not being retained at heifers, is a massively important job, but also very difficult. I'm well aware of the difficulties involved in this, and I consider myself extremely fortunate to have been involved with the Buitelaar group on this for a wee while. And so what we're going to run through is detail matters. I think one of the issues to come out of this whole project is that the demonstration that if you apply detail throughout the whole part of the job of rearing a calf, that we can get something out of that. I think if we're looking at new builds, the layout of the facility, there's some important issues we should take into consideration before we slap up another building. We just touched on hygiene, because I think that the design and construction of facilities has a major part in improving calf performance, improving you backing off on too much use of medications. And that's basically because we design facilities to support the management of hygiene. We have some predictable problems, scour being one of them, respiratory disease another. So our philosophy is to design our way out of that from the beginning. And that brings us to the detail and construction. And I think that whether people are interested in HHUs or not, or maybe making a small facility their own, I see endless projects where the things fail on the detail and construction phase. And I'll just point out one or two things there. And of course, yes, it all costs money. But we'll finish up on my little bit on, yeah, let's talk about inputs versus outputs, because there's two ways of looking at nice shiny new buildings. One is, isn't that great, but I can't afford it, and the other one is that just that throwing money around is the answer to our problems. But no, it's the detail. That's what I like to talk about. So Maya, next slide please. The details matter. When we first bumped into each other down the bottom left there, the remit really was something that I have been looking at for a long time. Is what we need is the calf pen. You are building a building and then filling it with all the bits to make a calf facility is actually the wrong way round to design it. And we went the other way, and I'm so grateful to Buitelaar that they, stuck with it. So our first iteration down the bottom there was basically taking the science of what we know about calves, what they like, group sizes, the influence of how you feed animals, how you clean pens, and the whole idea was to build a single unit that then could be replicated. And the first one was beautifully made and massively over-engineered, but we had a target which included a cost per calf, another stab. You came through at the second iteration, picture in the middle, and I think is to me an example of how hard it is for farmers to get what they want, because trying to get builders to build what you want is very, very difficult, and that example in the middle was one of them. But anyway, what you saw and what Gabby showed you is really where they have ended up today, is to take those basic design principles and construction principles and put them in place. So it was really, if we get all the detail in one pen right, why can we not do it for a sequence of 10 pens or more? So next slide please, Maya. The first thing is if we talk about new builds, it's something we've done forever and is actually now incredibly easy, is to pay attention to local weather. We're told that weather's unpredictable, but that's not correct. You can get local weather data, and if we look at the HHUs, for example, here, that the ventilation of calf housing is quite difficult because there's a lack of thermodynamics in still weather. And actually, Adam won't regret me saying this in public, but these type of buildings with their openness certainly would not be suitable. And for a dairy unit in Anglesey or the very tip of Cornwall, we have to understand that the impact of weather, actually whether it's calves or adult cows, there's a predictability about it. So that would influence the way maybe the arrangements of HHUs are laid out within the existing facilities. Access, very important. You're linked to biosecurity in the same way that modern sort of buildings of, when you're looking at building a new your parlour, for example, you tend to want it so that the wagons coming in from outside, you don't have a lot of ingress within the farm facilities. And that's the same if you're taking stock on and off the farm. And also where you put the calf house in relation to other aspects of your own farm in terms of your adult cattle and the risks of what comes in. Moving animals around, again, we learn a lot from the pig industry, actually, that where you establish a system where you expect to move animals, we'll design that into the facility. We don't have enough people to go running around the countryside collecting animals. We want to design the facility so that you have a flow around, and that goes the same for the feed, and then all the daily tasks. That again, at a design level, you'll see some details in the background there. There's doors within gates. That obviously adds cost, but the point about it is that if it makes getting in and out of a pen easier, then maybe people will get in and out of a pen easier when they need to. Just go and check on a calf in the back of that group. And so the design has incorporated a lot of that, and I think the continued development on this, which to me is really good, is that we actually ask the people that use this, how could they make it better? And a lot of it will be to do with how their daily tasks are made more efficient. So my next slide, please. Hygiene. It's always kind of been a bit of a bugbear with mine. That scour is the major issue in young calves, and I look at facilities and basically they're not cleanable. And you can see here that again, I'm very very grateful that Buitelaar ran with this, the use of panel tim, which is used thousands of square meters in the pig industry. It has thermal benefits, hygiene, and also you'll see that the small group size, this is whether you're running a unit like this or on your own dairy farm, the whole point is to be able to have each pen that can be run in, out, and cleaned in between. And what we're having a table there, just an interesting one that I've been working with the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, AFBI, in Northern Ireland. We're so lucky to have a good group of people working on research, but on practical farm levels. Team there led by Stephen Morrison and Gillian Scoley, and good staff. And we're just starting to put out data now about your findings from sort of 66 dairy units. And in the bottom there, just a single example is that they're out on farms, you're taking samples from a variety of locations on all these 66 farms, multiple samples, and this is just from inside milk. And we can see here that the hygiene indicator, we take TBCs, that's a broad indicator of the amount of viable bacteria jumping around in our milk supply, with the target on the far right there of sort of 10,000 active little bugs floating around per mil. So that's all right. There's bugs everywhere. They're in your ears and in your mouth. It's normal. But you'll see that if there's sort of 250 samples taken, that the median in there of just below 3,000 CFU per mil. That's good. That's below the target of 10,000. The headline in the way we talk to each other now will be the maximum result, which you can see there, is over 2.5 million counts in a mil. A mil is tiny. A mil is that's the end of your thumb. And so there's an issue there in terms of hygiene. How are we cleaning stuff? And the whole facility at Long Lane has been built, designed with that aspect running through it all the time. The actual headline value coming out of that little table there from the work done in AHDB is that the minimum, you can see that this is real data from real farms, that actually, whilst some farms have got a problem, there's other farms constantly knocking out, basically very clean milk supply. The bottom two lines there, the hygiene indicator being coliform and E. coli, well, anybody knows what's going on there. That's showing that fecal contamination is getting near the milk supply. And again, the headline coming out of there is that the minimum is 10, as people are quite competently putting milk in front of calves that don't have any dirt racking up. But as you can see on the maximum results, there's some people who've got a little bit of a problem. So I think we come through again that hygiene and being able to facilitate hygiene is a way of taking some of the bacterial burdens off calves. And I think an important part of that is being able to do it and clean facilities as well. So yes, Nick, are you coming in there?
I am indeed. Thank you, Jamie. And we've got a question in around the group size you mentioned, and with regards to that target of having small group sizes, and what are the benefits to this? And I suppose that probably ties into what you're talking around hygiene and so forth. So I'll leave that one with you to consider. And also just considering those high health units, are they any better than just conventional sheds? How can we explain it, I suppose, in layman's terms with regards to why they are creating a better environment? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think taking the latter one, I think in my travels I see quite a lot of farm facilities generally, but calf facilities in specifically, that actually for all people's hard work, they're actually incredibly hard to clean effectively. So that will be the first thing. I think this is we've run the design of the facility, whether it's Gabby was showing you how to keep it clean, people coming in the front door, to how we keep buildings clean. It's just designed in from the start, and attention to detail on that. So the second question, how is this? Will this be any better than a sort of conventional setup? Well, it depends on the conventional setup, of course, but a number of specific issues, and we'll maybe run on to the next slide, Mia, and we can pick up on that. Just in passing here, this is more work from the lovely people at AHDB, looking at dry matter of straw. Again, multiple samples of 66 farms. The red line is 70% dry matter. Everything above that is what we would like. Calves lie down for 16, 17 hours a day. Why would we want them to lie on a damp bed? Well, all the blue dots below that red line are situations within farm where real calves are lying on a damp bed. And so whether it's the HHU, which has been designed to manage the predictable flow of moisture through a damp bed, if you put up a conventional building, and again the next slide please, Maya, is would sort of suggest that it is that attention to detail. So if I nip straight to the right hand side here on construction of that slide, there is that the detail in the floor is incredibly important. But we've been thrashing around with problems of scouring calves in the Western world or across the world, and wondering why we have such a problem with it when we throw so much medication at it. And some of it is very basic. Let's deal with this once and for all, get the floor right. And if you speak to the people involved in the long lane development, but others too, is that where one of the difficulties for the farming sector is actually getting the floor specified right, number one, and then number two, getting it built properly is incredibly difficult. And But then you go, well, it's only difficult if you don't appreciate its importance. And you've got to stand there and make sure that the people laying the floor, if it's not you, do what has been designed. So I think in Long Lane, what you're seeing here is people have paid attention at every level. I think as well, if you look at the scale, so this comes back to comparing the HHU with a sort of conventional A-frame building or whatever, which in certain sites would be my preference. You know, when we get some dirty parts of the country in terms of weather, which I mentioned earlier, I would possibly want something that's a little bit more protected. But the scale here is such that we've designed it for the calves upwards. So the optimum group size, you coming from the science, is definitely the sort of, if the 6 to 10 calves per pen is superior to the 10 to 20. That's not to say 10 to 20 doesn't work. We've just sort of said, what are we being told by the data? So the farm has been developed specifically to run these kind of sizes of pens. You can put it inside a conventional building, that's fine, but you do need to be able to clean pens properly. And one of the problems with conventional buildings is people want to clean across pens. So if you've 6 groups of 6 pens of calves, people want to clean across 6 pens all at the same time with a tractor, which is the best way of spreading muck between 6 pens as I can think of. Last point here, the materials. Again, we've known, the science has known that calves, the first 2 months of life, they have a bit of trouble adjusting to variable temperature. Producers know this, they don't like October. You know, pneumonia starts to kick in when we get variable daytime temperatures. This is what the science community would have done if we existed anymore. We'd have put insulated roofs on buildings to see if the increased cost of putting that sheet on has a positive impact on the health and performance of the calf. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Mayor. And here we go. And when we see this, the point is to get here. My argument and what Buitelaar have done too is with the protocols, getting the colostrum right, even at farm level, getting all these things right. You can get all that right and then put them in a rubbish building. You won't get payback on your previous investment. And it goes the same the other way down. And I think what they've been doing here at Long Lane is trying to get so many of the bits right. Here we go. What's it doing? Well, this is measured because Long Lane also measures a part of their system. That the red line. This is the data, as Gabby said, that the unit being used for rearing calves for a number of years, and there's the red line. You're getting steady growth rates of purchased calves, but what comes through the HHU, you're chucking in the data says they're growing at another 187 grams per day. Now, some of that will be to do with consistent milk temperatures, some of that will be to blah, 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 and away we go. But the point is what that investment gives you back. So if you're looking at that, that's turning into, at 12 weeks in the rearing phase is about 15 kilograms live weight. So just to put a value on that, at £2 a kilo, that's £30 a calf. If you rear 200 calves a year, whether they're heifers, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. These are animals, we're in the food business, but 200 calves at £30 a calf, you do 15 kilos, £2 a kilo, 30 quid, 200, that's £6,000 a year added live weight if you just sold them for 2 quid each, which doesn't count, therefore, the time you've saved, because that only works with healthy animals. It doesn't talk about the antibiotics you haven't used because they're healthy animals. So I just wrap up there, Nick, and leave it there. But it's that, yes, it costs more to put an insulated roof panel on. The panel tin doesn't cost any more than concrete. It's just, it needs to be done correctly. So we have benefits, but we get the payback. And as I said, £6,000 a year improvement. You can see you do that for 3 years, 18 grand. These units, they're very viable, and the payback, we should always look to invest, but only if we get our money back. And they're doing it here. It's great to see. So thank you very much, Nick.
Right, just hold there. Let's, before Gabby jumps in and takes us to the next step, I've got a couple of quickies with regards to questions that are coming in, and we're getting a plethora of questions in, which is great. Appreciate it from the audience. Thank you very much. So I've got one question with regards to the flexibility or the risk of less flexibility with using purpose-built calf housing. So what's your view with regards to the risk of making it less flexible as a business if you invest in specific calf housing? And the second one was just a really simple one with regards to what's the name of the building material sheeting you've mentioned with regards to the walls, I think it was, and the dividing sections. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. The first question, it comes again and again, fully understood. The thing about it is you wouldn't build a parlour for milking cows. A very important part, that's how you make money. You wouldn't put that in a general purpose shed. And I think that one of the things that's been going wrong with the calf sector, these problems were spotted, certainly in my experience, 40 years ago. And I think in many ways the farming sector has been under supported by the construction industry. Trying to do this in an 80x40 shed so that maybe in the future you could put sturks in it is, yeah, fine. But the point is that if you could spend your money and you can get payback on that money, within a 4-year period, let us say, and then after 10 years you decide you're not going to do calves anymore, then yeah, you're absolutely right. I would say that about a 4-furrow plough. I would say that about a parlour as well. So I think as well, if you look at the next development that will come out of Buitelaar, which is, if you like, the fixed HHU, then I can tell you there's no problem then. Come up to Scotland, we can keep you, we can grow heavy stores, basically as long as there's a roof and somewhere for the muck. If we can turn buildings over clean and with good sort of labour input, yeah, we're fine. We're fine. The name of the material is panel tin. I mean, what would be great is if the industry got together. It's the obvious place to put recycled plastic, but it's called panel tin, and it's it's not a substantially different cost per square metre than concrete.
Brilliant. That's much appreciated. Now I'm thinking Gabby's going to come in, and we've got some more questions, Jamie, but I'll save those to the end, recognising time. So thanks, Gabby.
Great. Thanks very much, Jamie. Brilliant as ever. As can be said with the rest of it, not quite the same as in person. Anyone who's seen Jamie speak live, he's yeah, incredibly animated and very interactive. But no, great, thank you very much. So yeah, just to hand over to Adam, who's going to take us through the future of the supply chain, and I suppose what we've done at Long Lane, but more so why we've done it. Although it's been a labour of love, blood, sweat and tears. So there is good reason behind what we've done. So yeah, I'll leave it with you, Adam.
Good. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for coming on to listen. And thank you very much, Nick and the crew. And I've been very, very honoured to be involved with the GB calf strategy with yourself and NFU and AHDB has been fantastic. So yeah, really good and really happy to support it. When people visit Long Lane or speak to me about Long Lane, the biggest question I ever get is kind of why have you done this? Why have you built a farm? Why don't you keep all these so-called secrets to yourself? And why don't you try and just get a competitive advantage? And my big answer to that is I often think that farming gets a raw stick. I think it's been very good to me in my life, and we've been. We've met some great people in it, and I just feel like we would also like to give a bit back. I also feel that there's a lot of muck and mystery around some products that's sold on farm, and I'll get onto that with my evidence-based facts in a few moments. But I see Long Lane as a farm. Obviously universities do an awful lot of good and really do some groundbreaking stuff. but I often feel that that can't actually get translated that easy on farms. So the idea really with Long Lane was that it would be kind of a bridge between academia and what could actually physically happen on farm. So we're not only listening about it in a nice brochure, we're actually making it happen. Also, probably quite selfishly, Long Lane was set up for Buitelaar, for ourselves, because we have 38 calf rearing units. We rear just over 50,000 calves, and we needed a farm that we did trials at, that we made sure, well, actually, what's the best way to rear a calf? And I personally have been rearing calves from 8 years old or 9 years old. And what I found was a lot of the things that maybe I believed or I thought was correct, actually, when you actually have evidence-based facts behind them, maybe you're not correct. So it certainly opened my eyes. We felt the site would be a good place to demonstrate good calf rearing. We felt that we would be able to get government officials and, you know, down to the site. And, you know, we've recently hosted a few meetings with AFRA and NFU and AHDB, where we've actually had government officials that wouldn't normally come out on a farm and wouldn't normally understand what a TB unit is, but have actually come and seen it with their own eyes. And I think, you know, there's been some really good ground made, you know, recently on that, because I think it's sometimes good to just actually feel it, touch it, and you know, and have been more than helpful. And the other thing was that I've always felt, you know, that if you look at the pig industry, you know, a pig farmer builds a specialist pig shed, often costing a lot of money. And a chicken farmer builds a specialist chicken shed, also costing a lot of money. But a beef farmer often builds a shed that if ever he gets out of beef, he could tip a load of corn up in it, and then he doesn't understand why he gets pneumonia. And I think what we've got to try and do, and the whole idea of Long Lane, was to try and give people confidence that actually, if you go ahead and build a proper calf rearing unit, you actually can get paid back for it. And that's why we're being so open with our costings and different things to say, look, guys, you know, as Jamie said, you know, with 15 kilos on a calf in a rearing period is absolutely massive. But not only that, is how much that benefits that animal in later life. You know, that animal will keep that growth curve and actually be fattened far younger. So that fits very well in with animals on earth for less time, eating less food, you know, and ultimately earning the farmer more money. So if we could just have the next slide, please. Okay, so one thing, if any of you have been to Long Lane, and if you haven't, again, as Gabby said earlier, it's not quite the same online, but we will have more open days over the year, and everybody is absolutely more than welcome. But one thing you'll hear me harp on about is evidence-based facts. So I think being in farming industry, we're often guilty of meeting Johnny or Jill down the pub and them telling you some, you know, story of, oh, well, if you rear your calves like this is what happens, or this will work, or that won't work. And certainly my mother used to, if a calf had a scour, she'd give you a whole egg and tell you to put the egg down the throat of the calf, and maybe if it eats the shell as well, it'll be even better. But, you know, these things often can be an element of truth, but at the end of the day, you know, we don't really know them. So what we've really tried to do is have proper trials. And to be totally honest with you, until we had Long Lane, I didn't understand what a proper trial was. You know, you say, okay, well, I'll feed these calves on this milk powder for a little while, and then I'll put them on another milk powder. But there's things that have to be considered that you never ever think of, you know, wind direction, time of year, temperature, you know, with all these things, are they exactly the same? So when you come, you'll see that lots of pens all on one side of the shed, all in the same wind direction. We've done every other pen with a different with 2 alternative products, so we can actually really see them like for like. And then exactly the same the opposite side. Everything's weighed, measured, temperature. You know, we've got all temperature gauges in each building. You know, we've got. And I think the beautiful thing about Long Lane is, as Gabby alluded to earlier, is that when we bought Long Lane of a very good friend of mine who reared calves for years, was an incredibly good calf rearer, and there was a lot of old buildings and it was quite underinvested. But rather than knocking those buildings down and saying, right, we're going to build this brand new sparkling site, we've kept those buildings up. So it's actually enabled us to do trials between conventional sheds and new style sheds. And although the high health unit looks lovely and shiny and nice, but that's took us 6 or 7 years to get where we've got, and we have made a lot of mess ups on the way. You know, it hasn't all been easy going, and you know, I think Jamie underestimates himself. You know, Jamie and Tim and Alan were so influential in the design of the materials, and the thought that's gone into every single thing has been quite immense. So, you know, I think it's great that it's willing to be shared publicly. And as Jamie said, you know, well, actually, it's my next slide. I won't get in front of myself. And then just talk about evidence-based facts. You know, there's a lot of things there that, you know, certain companies sell, and I've been guilty in the past of saying, that's fairy dust, you know, good marketing, fairy dust. But the fact is, some of those products actually genuinely work and are very genuinely good, but because they're quite expensive and you don't see a purpose for them, you feel like, no, I don't want to buy them, and can often rubbish them. And so we've used quite a lot of different products from all sorts of over the country. I think we've tried 18 different types of milk powder. We've tried all sorts of different nuts. It's been totally amazing what we've managed to learn. But one of our big things has always been is to be able to reduce our use of antibiotics. So we now have no use of prophylactic treatment. Gabby mentioned earlier that we have an aspirin powder, but that is not an antibiotic. So that's been a very big move, and to maintain the weight gains we've got, we're very proud of it, to be honest. And we're very proud of our farm team to be able to manage to do what they've done. So really our biggest thing now is trialing kind of alternative antibiotics. What can we use instead of, and that's been very interesting. But we're even trialing things like, you know, other things compared to straw. We've even had a sand trial. We've got infrared lamps over sand to see, well, actually, can we keep the calves warm? Can we, you know, there's all sorts of different things that's very interesting, and certainly we'll be very open with the findings when we have them. If we could have the next slide, please. So something that I feel is quite unique about Buitelaar is Buitelaar are a calf rearing and meat business. We market the meat, you know, from baby calves coming off the dairy farm right the way through to selling the meat to the consumer. But we don't have a milk powder factory. We don't have a shed building company, and nor do we really have any interest in having one, to be honest. But the reason we kind of developed our own milk powder was for the fact that we tried lots of powders, and we found some very good powders, to be honest. And you know, any of the main brands in England, I certainly wouldn't say anything wrong about any of them. However, what we found is we found what works best for us. We found what puts the most kilos on, and as I mentioned earlier, if we can change our 50,000 calves by £3 a calf, that's an awful lot of money per year to us. So the R&D that goes into understanding powders and various things is quite immense, but it's probably, as I said, selfishly, that's been for our own reasons. However, that's what we've done from that. Then we've developed a powder range that we send to our rearers, and we also obviously have then sold to the public, because obviously the more we buy, the more obviously better power we have on enabling getting the price correct. And as far as the buildings are concerned, you know, we keep tweaking the buildings and tweaking. As I said, over the last 6 years, we've made some massive changes. And one thing you will see when you come to Long Lane is we've kept the last 3 changes all there. So we've got 3, and you'll actually see how we've changed the feed troughs, how we've changed the different types of buildings. And you'll see, well, actually, this is what we had, you know, 4 years ago. This is what we had 3 years ago. This is what we had 2 years ago. And you'll see the transition, what's happened in our head, even from the nipple drinkers, all sorts of different things is quite exciting. But again, we don't sell panel tin, we don't sell any of these things, but we obviously now do sell the buildings. But you know, if somebody also wants to make their own, to be honest, that's fine by us. You know, that's not really our bag, but we are also happy to help in any way we can. May I take the next slide, please? Okay, so I've kind of covered this, but just to reiterate, so the main purpose for the farm was research and development for our own rearing units, but now we're obviously going to make that public, or are making it public, and I think we had, even with COVID last year, we had several open days. And I feel if any of you were there, I feel you hopefully find that we were quite open. A teaching facility, so we work very closely with Synergy Farm vets. They sometimes bring students or young vets coming to have a look at what we are doing. We also have potential calf rearers for ourselves, and we do certain courses, amongst ourselves or in-house courses. Demonstration calf rearing blueprint. So really, what we're aiming to do is actually have a blueprint for calf rearing. Again, that's been developed for what we do in our own units, but certainly, we would be happy to share our findings. And as Jamie said, what is the ultimate pen size of a calf? It doesn't have to always be products, but is it 6 to 10 or is it 10 and above? And as Jamie also rightly said, that doesn't mean it's impossible with over 10 calves, but we have proof that the calves don't put as much weight on and don't ultimately do as well. And there's things like the high health units, what Jamie mentioned earlier, which is the weight gain, which is incredibly good. But I think for me, the most exciting thing was, which is monetary, but not as monetary, but is I've got to get the figure up, I think it was 27% less antibiotic interventions in the new buildings compared to the old ones. So that's the same farm, same staff, just different types of buildings, which is quite amazing. And then last but not least, we run Long Lane as a commercial enterprise. So it's not government funded, government backed, it's not subsidized in any way. The farm is a commercial unit. So we need to make sure that if you come to Long Lane, you can replicate what we do. And that's very important to us, that people, we a few years ago, we built a very nice calf rearing unit in Ireland. And we had loads of people come and they said, oh, it's very nice, but actually it's too much money and we can't afford it, we don't want it. And that, we learned a lot of lessons from that. So what we've made Long Lane is we've made it an absolute commercial enterprise that people can say, okay, here's a blueprint, I can go ahead and do this and I can put a calf unit up. May I have the next slide, please? Oh, we're missing one. Something's gone wrong. Can you hear me, Maya? Well, there's one now missing, Nick. It's about the genetics and marketing.
Right. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's in the pack. Can you talk to it rather than?
Okay. Well.
Sorry, I don't have that one.
Oh, interesting. Okay, no problem. I will remember it. So the slide basically was again, Nick alluded to it earlier. It was all about making sure that we use our genetics responsibly, our breeding programs responsibly, so we breed a calf that we can handle. And I know on the dairy farming side, the first love is milk, absolutely, and the animals. But we need to make sure that we can actually produce a calf that will go forward and also work for the beef man as well. It's very, very important. And there's on the I'm just trying to remember what we had now. And then on the next side we had obviously calf facilities or farm calf health, but I think I've covered that well enough. We then talked about the marketing and the consumer perception. Yeah, so we all know that we've suffered with the perception of what farming is. We feel that there's a lot of people knocked farming absolutely wrongly in many circumstances, and we've got to make sure the perception is right. And for sure, people talk about less beef being eaten. I think worldwide at this moment in time there is not less beef being eaten, there is actually more beef being eaten. But I do feel in Europe and in the UK there will be less beef eaten over the next few years. However, I don't think that's a negative. I think that's, in fact, it could be made into a positive. I also feel the mass market of anything isn't good. I think mass marketing of corn, of beef, of chicken, of pork, pork is never a lot of good. I think we need to have something special. And the way Buitelaar has gone about this is we introduced the Longhorn breed there a few years ago. So we put the Longhorn breed in, we've inseminated over 5,000 cows now, or 5,000 calvings we had last year to Longhorn. The idea of this is with the consumer that they will actually see something a little bit special. So the Longhorn is the oldest breed in the world. We feel if somebody's going to eat a steak, they might only eat a steak once every 2 weeks, and they want to feel special about that steak. So they want a story with that steak. And this doesn't only work for Longhorn, this works for other breeds as well. But it's actually having something that's a little bit different and a little bit. And the other thing that we feel with the Longhorn is that it's a farming animal. You know, it's an animal, it's a big, long animal. It's fattens very easily because it's actually a native breed of the UK. And it's also designed to get fat licking a rock, really, and obviously very easy calving because that's how the animals are bred, to be outside and look after themselves, really. But as far as the consumer is concerned, you know, if somebody wants beef, it looks a very beefy animal. But I'm not just pushing the Longhorn. There's lots of breeds that can fit this, the Angus, the Hereford, various different things. But I think we've got to make sure that we actually look to market a product off a farm rather than sell a commodity. We need to be in charge of what we sell. And I think, you know, shout about your sire, all those different things are absolutely fantastic, and we do need to listen to them. And we need to make sure our marketing is correct, and our marketing needs to be very honest. I think, you know, we don't want to be greenwashing products or doing different things. We need to make sure that there is absolute truth in what we market, but we need to make sure that we also shout about the good things that we do. So I suppose my last message really is that I believe we've got actually quite an exciting future. I don't agree, you know, with what people have been saying about farming, but I do genuinely believe that we could turn this on its head quite easily, and things like the GB calf strategy will certainly help do so. Okay, over to you, Nick.
That's much appreciated, Adam. Great job, and apologies, we seem to have dropped the slide somewhere. What I do have, though, is a significant number of questions that we have a nice 10-minute or so block now. If I could invite Gabby, Jamie back onto the screen, and we'll try and work through some of these. I'd ask you to be brief but detailed, if I can, with regards to the questions. So there's a few general ones, but I'll try and knock some of the quick ones over to start with. So Jamie's back on as well. Thank you. Right. Gabby, what levels of milk are fed to calves, and at what concentration of milk replacer, please?
I think we probably covered that one earlier, did we, Nick? Was that the one that I answered during the talk? That was the 3 litres either end of the day at 150 grams to make a litre. For anyone who missed it, sorry, it was probably me.
Nothing wrong with reiterating it. Excellent, that's good. Right, and are you willing to share the expected daily live weight gain at each stage for, say, blue heifers seen in the tour?
Yeah, no problem. Looking at pre-weaning, we're looking for 0.9 of a kilo, so about 900 grams a day, and post-weaning we're looking at 1.1 to 1.2 on the rearing unit. Down at Long Lane we are slightly higher, but that's our supply chain average, so we're coming out at 1.1 through the supply chain.
Yep. Excellent. Another one around milk powder, protein content, how much are you feeding? We'll leave the how much are you feeding. We've got that. Protein content, what level would you be working?
Protein content of the powder we're feeding down at the farm is, or across the supply chain actually, is 19% protein.
Excellent. We are doing well. Thank you, Gabby.
Can I just pick up on a small point on that? Do you mind? This is something that comes up all the time. There's a real bugbear of mine on this protein, and it's a real salesman thing. You know, and one thing I did say before is, do you know how much a piece of leather, do you know what percent protein is a piece of leather? It's 30 to 35%, but you can't eat it. It's all about digestible protein, and sometimes these commercial milk powders selling 24, 23, 24% protein, it's actually a load of balls, to be honest. Sorry about my swearing, I shouldn't swear, but and that's a typical thing of what we're proving in Long Lane. It's salesman stuff. It has to be a digestible protein, and it's this is no good, this oil's too high. At the end of the day, it's what works on farm, and I think that's where we've got to go. And a lot of people have said to me, oh well, if you did a higher protein, we'd buy your milk powder. And I said, I'm not really interested. We'll only sell what works.
Right. Thank you, Adam and Gabby, for that. And yes, sensible, and certainly when they're babies, as they are with calves, Strategy around antibiotic antimicrobial use. I think, Adam, you touched on no prophylactic treatment. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Gabby?
Yeah, so obviously not using CIAs through the supply chain, but yeah, I mean, in terms of what we're doing with an approach to antimicrobial reduction, as Adam said, non-prophylactic use. However, I think something that's really important to touch on here actually is the prioritization of calf welfare. Okay, so as I say, you know, yes, we're managing an expected problem as the calves come in, but something that we won't stray away from is treating an animal when it requires treatment. Now, as I say, really important to ensure that the environment and the situation you're providing the calf with isn't bringing on any problems, but as I say, welfare comes before everything else. So yeah, that's probably a bit of a summary there.
That's appreciated, and I think, yeah, sensible way of looking at it, whichever way we continue to reduce the use of antimicrobials. And just to clarify, CIAs, HB-CIAs, high priority, critically important antibiotics, which are the ones that the industry continues to try and move away from and ensure that we're using not ones which are used on human use as well. Okay, thank you. Is weaning done, Gabby, on a time basis or an intake basis?
So we operate on a batch intake basis. As I say, basically around that 6-week mark when we weigh them, we then analyse their growth profile. So there'll be a standardised weaning process which steps down over 2 weeks. But in the instance of anything that's underperforming, they will remain on milk, you know, for an extended period. But
yeah, good answer, thank you. Targets for respiratory health performance on the unit.
As I say, really probably comes into what we were discussing earlier in terms of ensuring that anything that requires treatment is treated. Yes, absolutely, we have our own internal sort of goals per unit, but we ensure that those are sort of worked on as time progresses, and that, you know, those those targets regarding first line treatments, second line treatments are sort of reflective of the unit by a case by case basis.
I think if I may come in here, that it's an important aspect of the inputs and outputs of these calf systems. Again, I'm going to applaud AHDB in Northern Ireland, but you published work looking at the records of 100,000 dairy cows, says that calves that were basically injected twice or more during the milk-fed phase as heifers. You're looking at a measured loss of between 700 and 900 pounds by the end of second lactation. So you can see again that whereas I was talking about, obviously, if a calf at 12 weeks is that little bit heavier, all the science says that animal will get to its breeding age at the right time and less resources go into it. And I think Adam's spoken about promoting a good story here, and I'm with it all the way, is that actually we can reduce the sort of the carbon footprint of what we're doing, or where we're getting into trouble as an industry, people pointing the finger, by tightening up what we do at home. And but that figure, this managing respiratory disease, for example, is where if you drop the number of heifer calves on your unit that you're jagging twice or more on milk, from 20 out of 100 to 10 out of 100, that's you looking at a saving of thousands of pounds per annum in terms of the productivity of those animals. So I think that's a very important point to make, because we're talking about resource use.
Sorry, Nick, I know you're probably really keen to move on, but just something to add on the end there is that monitoring, yes, interventions is really important for us, but actually it's the mortality and immobility, as we call it, which are those animals which may not have died, so to speak, but actually aren't viable for the further supply chain, that we monitor, and that's coming under 2% in the unit. So that's actually across the supply chain. That's not isolated to development farm, and that's really the biggest indicator. As I say, your mortality is one thing, but it's really important to ensure that you know what's not meeting spec.
Yeah, within that integrated supply chain idea. Excellent, thank you. And Jamie, while you've got your mic open, A couple of more general ones with regards to cleaning procedures. What ideal cleaning procedures between batches would you look at? And the other one I'll tag on to the side of that is optimal position in terms of wind direction for a calf shed, please.
I think on the cleaning, being able to get all the animals out swiftly, again, comes down to this batch size design. I see a lot of people running into problems. They honestly do not give themselves enough time. So how to clean something, number one, have enough time to do the job properly. It's a major issue. The second thing is that for me, I would use a steam cleaner. If I had any suspicion that things were getting a bit grubby, I would also use a detergent. And then after that, I would have a discussion with the veterinarian about appropriate disinfectant to use at the right application rate and leave it for the right amount of time, which all comes out. There's a circular argument for you. I think time to do the job properly is actually a major issue within the industry, and obviously it's a major issue in very large buildings. It's very difficult to clean, you know, a pen in the middle of a whole load of other pens when there's calves in there. So I think being honest about time, and then people get in a muddle because they say, well, we're overstocked, so we can never be empty. And I say, well, your system is in trouble. Your system is in trouble. In terms of orientation of the calf house, well, I kind of go, the first thing is I would prefer it, if it was brand new, that you would basically put it upwind of the rest of the cattle. You know, it's an aerosol dispersal. It's a random numbers game, which hopefully we've all educated ourselves over the last 2 years what risk means in terms of respiratory disease. But I wouldn't get too tied up on that. But that would be my number one choice. And then the second thing is that on the basis that ventilation is mostly driven by the wind, is to have it open or available for the wind to get through it on all four sides, because the wind comes from every direction. Yes, most of it comes from the southwest, but that's 60% of the year. So 40% of the year it comes another direction. So what's cute about the HHU and what they've done in the existing buildings around there is that actually the wind can get in amongst the calves above calf height anyway, whichever way the wind blows, but we have to manage speed. That's also critical. That's why an HHU should not be put on top of a mountain in Anglesey. I'll put that in especially for Adam.
Not expecting sales up in Scotland too heavy.
It's hard to get straw on top of a mountain, Jamie.
Yeah, there you go. Right, let's conscious that we've got a couple of minutes to deadline, but I may well just, because we've got some really good questions here, I may well just run over a couple of minutes. I hope the audience can stay with it. So a couple of quick ones with regards to jackets or no jackets. Caroline's noticed that there's no jackets in the pictures and so forth. What's your view on jackets, please?
So if I'm totally honest, Caroline, there are calves on the unit with jackets on. The lovely girl Charlotte, who was helping me film the tour, asked if she should film them. Calves had them on for 3 weeks and they didn't look that clean, and I said no. So we actually, the smallest calves in the batch have jackets on. Yes, absolutely, yes to jackets, 100%. As long as they are thoroughly cleaned between batches, I am all for jackets. Jamie's probably got something to add to that.
I think he's just agreeing with you that jackets is the way forward. Feeding milk via teats or in troughs?
So everything on farm at Long Lane is trough fed. So we trough feed on the basis that the trial work that has been done in Holland suggests absolutely no difference in performance. And in terms of milk feeding, we're feeding around 700 calves twice a day, and time-wise we wouldn't be able to get around them all. But I will just say, in terms of trough feeding, volume of animals, number of animals involved is really important, so that you're able to batch those calves in suitable groups. So it is not something that you can operate on small numbers with a huge age profile or weight profile. You have to have similar size and similar age calves to be able to operate a trough fed system.
That's brilliant. You're also reading ahead as well. Someone had picked out with regard to slow drinkers, which I think probably ties into the same batching idea of trying to align those who are maybe slightly younger or slower with one another. So appreciate it.
Just add to that individual basis, in terms of, we've got bottles, so the girls and boys feeding on farm will bottle feed probably 2% of a batch. There'll be 3 or 4 calves which will always need a bottle, and that's something that, you know, you never remove the requirement for individual basis treatment.
Good attention to detail.
Yeah, I think that last point, Gabby, is very important. There's another systems point. You know, if we have a system but we don't plan for what goes wrong, that's not a good system. You know, you can't have that many calves running through. They need to be the same groups, general size, for obvious reasons. But if you have something that starts falling behind, it needs support in the same way as rapid intervention with some antibiotics, which Gabby was talking about earlier. You know, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think just a quick comment on the jackets. There's your misconception running around big time there. We need to understand that that basically probably 6 months of the year in the UK, certainly down in the luxury of the southwest of England, you don't need jackets. It's to do with the temperature dynamics, and if they're being fed properly, then in the summer months they don't need it. But as soon as, something starts to wobble, goes a bit weak, get the jacket in there. Come the autumn, different situation, but I think that they must be clean, otherwise don't use them. And probably you can say that in the winter months, they're only needed on a calf from sort of day 0 to day 21. You know, so the calves that Buitelaar are dealing with are just coming in on the cusp of that. In the summer months, they won't be cold. In the winter months, they will be. But the important thing as well is to pick out the one that needs support quickly before it goes down and spreads problems elsewhere. So the jacket job, most calves in Britain, you know, would benefit at least for the first couple of weeks in winter. After that, they don't need them.
Right, I'm conscious of time, but thank you, Jamie. I've got some questions with regards to specifications around floors and so forth that I think we're going to have to leave now, recognising we've just got a couple of slides I just want to pick up on. We will look to answer the other questions and share the answers with the specific people who have asked. We have just got a few more left, but I think recognising the time, appreciate everybody's feedback on this, and knowing that we are slightly over time. So if I could ask to have the last couple of slides, that would be appreciated. Thank you all for your input. So I think from an AHDB point of view, hopefully people will be aware that we are asking our levy payers with regards to their views on AHDB and how we can move forward in the next 5 years, and so shape the future with regards to dairy, but the other sectors across beef and lamb, cereals and oilseeds, and pigs as well, are all at the moment asking farmers to register with regards to your opportunity to vote. Now, that registration, if you flick to the next slide, will give you the opportunity come April, middle of April, when we open up that vote, to be able to vote. So it's a 2-step process, and I would ask all of those farmers who are on the call at the moment, we will share the link there down on the bottom in the follow-up email. But if I could ask the farmers who haven't already, and we've had a good response to the publicity and the activity of the AHDB team already, but for those who haven't yet registered, be aware that if you're not registered, you will not be able to participate in the vote in April. So just encourage you to look at that, take the details down there, take a photo of it, and just go to the website. You'll be able to, it's literally a 2-minute job. So although I've run over a couple of minutes now, I would suggest that probably the most effective way is to jump onto that onto the AHDB website. It's easy to track down the Shape the Future link and register yourselves so that you have the opportunity to vote. So much appreciate it. That's the AHDB advert on the end of this. I can only thank Gabby, Jamie and Adam for their participation today. That's the first and that's the launch of CARF Week. That's the first of a series of webinars. Please go to the AHDB or NFU website to see the rest of the itinerary for the week ahead, and encourage you to participate. Hopefully you've, and certainly judging by the activity and questions today, it's been a really positive session. So thank you all once again, and appreciate that activity and engagement, and would encourage you to tie into the future week's activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.